Good evening, everyone. The time being 6:02, I declare the meeting open. And welcome those present in attendance, and advise that the meeting will be digitally recorded. In accordance with the Council Policy GOV.017, digital recording of Council meetings to record meetings of Council to assist in the preparation of minutes and to allow live stream of the Council meetings. I'd also like to acknowledge the country. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners and the custodians on the land on which we meet today, the Tomagina people, and to pay our respect to those that have passed before us, their history and their culture. Okay, record of attendance. We're all present, councillors. Apologies nil, and leave of absence previously approved nil. Confirmation of the minutes of our previous meeting. We have a mover and a seconder for that, please.
So moved, please, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Dunya moved.
I'll second that.
That was Councillor Edwards. At this stage, any corrections to the minutes are to be identified and agreed at this point prior to taking a vote to adopt the minutes. Are there any corrections? Take that as no, and I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Councillor, agenda item number, or staff, agenda item number. Do we have any declarations of interest? I take that as nil. Council announcements and reports. Announcements by the Mayor. I've no announcements to make. The Mayor's communications, item 4.2, that the Council note the Mayor's communications for the last month. Would someone like to move that, please? Councillor Bramish?
Second it.
Councillor Hyland, I think. And I'll ask, are there any questions regarding that communications list? No questions. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Notification of council workshops. That the council note the following workshops. There is a list there of those, and councillors' attendance records. Could we have a motion on that, please? That was Councillor Courtney.
I'll second that.
Councillor Edwards. Any questions, any conversation, any speakers? No? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Did I? Oh, I did too. Sorry, we'll go back to 4.3. Reports by delegates. Nil received. 4.4, yeah, with notification of the workshops, yeah, so, yep, thanks for that. I overlooked that. Public questions and statements from previous meetings, that's all listed there with the responses. The responses, public questions without notice. We are at that stage of the meeting, and before we undertake that, the Council encourages community participation in its meetings through the opportunity for public questions and statements. Consistent with Council's core values, councillors and staff strive to ensure all people are treated with courtesy, fairness, dignity and respect, and we know the residents and ratepayers will apply the similar standards in their dealings with Council. As Mayor, it's my responsibility to maintain orderly conduct of Council meetings and to determine whether a question or statement is out of order due to unforeseen, offensive or objectionable or defamatory expressions. I know members of the public will show consideration and courtesy in their comments. Thank you. So we move on to the questions received in writing, and those people that wish to public statements without 5.4. Yeah. 5.5. The public statements without notice. And to begin with, Mr. Ewington, would you like to present your what was it? Questions or a statement? Both. Okay. Do them both while you're up there, please.
Firstly, I would like to take the time to thank members of the community and the individuals within the council who have
provided their support over the years and assisted with changes that benefit the disabled and elderly residents of the community. I have now been in a wheelchair for over 16 years, and I understand firsthand how simple tasks for most people can be difficult or impossible once and no longer physically able. Things such as opening doors, navigating steps, and have too high or too low, a lack of access ramps, parking spaces, and disability facilities, and just some of the challenges that elderly and disabled struggle with when they venture out. There are everyday challenges that the average person wouldn't consider as their daily life, able to access the premises or not. This can be put off people from going out at all due to difficulties faced, which can cause social isolation, loneliness, and mental health issues. Able-bodied people, with the exception of carers or those with loved ones in those circumstances, often don't consider their daily struggles. I acknowledge this is not due to intentional disregard, but often simple a lack of direct experience, which brings awareness to the challenges that these people face. I know I have learnt so much in the last 16 years that there are so many things that I wouldn't have considered until I was in the position to experience it myself. Throughout the years, I have made an effort to assist and represent people, young and old, to put forward requests to the council to make changes would increase the safety, accessibility and inclusion of all members of our community. This includes installation of tactile pavers for the visually impaired, disability parking at required venues, ramps, access for people using wheelchairs and other mobility aids, providing an ease of entry into a range of premises and more. Unfortunately, while certain members that have been accommodating, the overall culture of the Waratah Wynyard Council has been unsupportive, and they are often not willing to make changes until they are heavily pressured or even threatened with legal action. It shouldn't be this way. Please listen. There has been comments by council members such as, "We didn't have to worry when these things appeared 30 years ago," and they may be true, but times have changed, and it is now being recognised that everyone has a right to be part of the community and feel accepted and included. Other councils recognise these weaknesses and are making positive changes, and I would like to see Waratah Wynyard Council following the same way. In November last year, I attended the monthly council meeting and made a public statement regarding establishing an inclusion of disability access plan for the municipality. Many other councils in Tasmania have working groups of committees actively working towards ensuring their communities are accessible and inclusive for everyone. I would like to see the same happening in Wynyard. The Australian government has also introduced a new national disability strategy which sets out a plan for continuing to improve the lives of people with disability. So a local strategy based on the national framework would work well. So far it has been 3 months and I have not received a response from the council. So I am here again today to make this request, as I believe it is important for the blind, elderly, disabled, disadvantaged people in our community to feel accepted and included and access to services and venues that able-bodied people and people without disabilities do. Again, I would like to propose that a working group is established with a range of people from different backgrounds to represent those in our community
point of order,
who
please.
feel
He's had his
like
3
they
minutes.
do not have a voice.
He's had his 3 minutes.
Or hasn't comfortable rising their concerns out of fear of being a nuisance. Everyone deserves the opportunity to take part in the community life, and I hope that the council is open to take steps towards making Wynyard and surrounding areas a more inclusive community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Ewington. And you had questions?
Yeah. I'll try and speak as quick as I can, Mr. Chairman, but I do get a bit tongue-tied. Tactile paving installation west end of IGA supermarket, Park Street, Wynyard. Blind Citizens of Australia stated that tactile ground service indicators are essential to assist
Mr. Ewington, your question. Yeah.
Give an outline.
Beg pardon?
Just give an outline.
Yeah, what was your question? We
Well,
don't want another statement, we want your questions.
Oh, okay. Okay, you want that one, Mr. Chairman?
No,
Why
what
is
was,
the council preventing pedestrians with vision impaired, allowing them to walk with the aid of a blind dog to travel to the main street of Wynyard and be part of the community? As pedestrians with vision impaired are required to walk their dog a minimum distance each day to allow them to keep the ownership of the dog.
Do you understand the question, Mr. GM?
No, I don't know.
No, I don't either. Could you just briefly,
No, you told me not to give an outline of the thing. You asked a question. That's all I've given, Mr. Chairman.
I was just asking you, could you shorten it into a question that we can understand, please?
Well, the question I told you. Why is the county preventing pedestrians with vision impaired, allowing them to walk with the aid of a blind dog to travel to the main street of Wynyard and be part of the community?
Why are we preventing them?
Because you're not putting tactiles down posts to allow them safe access across the street, Mr. Chairman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the response is that council isn't preventing anyone from accessing anything at this point in time.
No.
Mr. Chairman,
We're not here for a to and fro conversation. We're answering your question, Mr. Ewington. Thank you. Do you have another question?
yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Last month I gave a detailed report of foxglove concerns, and I pointed out that Prelina Road had an outbreak of foxglove, which the council employees were slashing the road birds at the time. I've been instructed by the powers that be that the operators have a full understanding of foxglove, and unfortunately they just went through and slashed the foxglove and spread the seed. So why is this happening?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's not a question I can answer tonight. I'm not aware of the council officers slashing foxglove and would need to take that on notice and follow it up accordingly.
Thanks, Mr. GM.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
If you're getting that all out.
Oh, fair enough. Good on you. Yeah. Dr. Pam Schultz, Doctor, you had a statement and 2 questions. Would you like to present those, please?
Yes, I would. Thank you for listening, everyone. Thank you. I'm Dr. Pam Schultz. I have a PhD on sea and tree-range landscapes and environmental thresholds. Although I'm new to Wynyard, I have connected well with the community, and during 7 months I have informed by the concerned citizens of Wynyard of the dredging of Camp Creek. It is obvious to me what needs to be done, given my experience in natural resource management, erosion control and habitat management. I distributed a discussion paper to councillors and concerned citizens, and many of you received that and hopefully read it. Consequently, there is no longer just I, now it is we, as excursions to the creek and discussions have progressed between experienced and professional community members. There is considerable community support to not dredge the creek because of the future compaction of the ground, and it will destroy the existing regeneration that is now occurring. Supporters have already pledged voluntary hours and funds to rehabilitate the site with native riparian vegetation in line with Council's own ICEP document. Incidentally, the ICEP won a local government professionals award, but I'm struggling to see tangible outcomes of this 220 document. As experts in this field, we have drafted a preliminary landscape plan that does have outcomes and will help mitigate runoff and at the same time improve and enhance the habitat and make it a much more aesthetically pleasing view for passers-by. It is worth remembering that projects like these attract environmental awards for habitat restoration, which would be a better outcome than dredging. Noting that unregulated upstream works currently occurring will contribute to ongoing siltation downstream. This site is still a biodiversity hotspot. You probably know that term, because it is on the ecotone of fresh and salty water, has an upstream functional riparian zone, and therefore attracts more species and worthy of environmental restoration. Furthermore, this project will be educational, and it has already attracted attention from Bernie Tafe, whose sustainability teacher wants to get students involved. This area is ideal to showcase and educate the community, and down the track install interpretation signs, a bird hide, and a linking bridge for walkers. I have found this community to be very connected, and word gets around. With little effort from me, we have gained considerable community support without social media. I have a list of supporters you might want to see later, but now time does not permit. I'm appealing to Council's better judgment, because the times are changing. People's attitudes are changing towards a more balanced approach to development and towards environmental preservation and restoration. Our council needs to lead and support these initiatives and not to be left behind on these important issues. I have 2 questions.
Okay.
Council's reason for dredging, I understand, is to improve the amenity of the creek. So how is one dredging contract going to solve the problem when the silt will rebuild year after year, given the current upstream erosion and siltation issues? That's my first question. And my second question, instead of spending $473,791, and I have been given a slight alteration of that, because the dredging is about $60,000, I believe, for the dredging and final rehabilitation. Wouldn't it be better for the amenity and environment to go for the much cheaper option of a carefully planned restoration planting program undertaken by experienced and expert community groups and individuals, in line with Council's integrated council environment plan?
Thank you. Mr. GM, do we wish to answer those questions now or in writing at a later?
I think we will take them on notice, Mr. Mayor, and respond to Mrs. Schultz this week. We obviously have received these questions tonight, and believe there'll be some more in a second. And equally, we have had some representations from a number of community groups, as mentioned today. So I think there'll be broader interest in the responses. So I think we'll put together a response over the coming days, and as I said, have a response out to Mrs. Schultz during the course of the week.
Thank you, Shane.
Thank you. I couldn't read that. Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Ray Pearce, would you like to present your statement and questions, please?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and councillors. And I acknowledge traditional owners too, past and present, who would have known the Camp Creek site very well, I'm sure. I'm a restoration biologist and ornithologist first, really, and speaking in support of Pam Schultz's restoration initiative for Camp Creek. During recent surveys of Camp Creek, I've been mightily impressed, finding that it supports populations of really important, sensitive and threatened species, platypus, migratory species from the northern hemisphere, including Latham snipe, and many others. And these species require secluded habitats, secluded wetlands, well-vegetated riparian areas. Some of them require tall trees, mature trees, areas of clean water, and their habitats are protected under various international and national agreements. So it came as a bit of a shock to me, a real shock actually, to learn of the damaging dredging that Council had undertaken at Camp Creek in 2019. and that council plans to repeat that in the near future. And that will see compaction and other impacts that have been outlined by Pam Schultz just now. The dredging exercise does seem futile to me because there will be ongoing siltation both ways. There's a tidal movement, and then there's the upstream issues as well that have not been addressed. So on top of this, there's chronic adjacent impacts going on with an unregulated subdivision development happening just a few hundred metres upstream beside Camp Creek and beside the old airport runway, or the shortest airport runway. And the chronic impacts there include bulldozing of tonnes of soil and rubbish into the riparian edge of the creek, which will run off into the creek and impact downstream. There's also the direct piping of unfiltered stormwater that is about to happen there, which we can see from current works. And all of that right beside the main platypus pool in Camp Creek. It's just baffling. This could become very embarrassing for us all, given the international agreements that we have. And I mentioned those migratory species. There's the Bonn Convention, for instance. And clearly we don't want council or anyone else being put into awkward situations. And so we're here to help, really, by offering expert advice and providing of alternative options, really, for Camp Creek that would be environmentally sustainable. And we would propose to utilise the collective brain power of Wynyard's many environmental specialists. I'm amazed how many technical people there are in the community, something which Dr. Schultz has already begun. And with this approach, we can see how an important biodiversity hotspot like Camp Creek could be used instead as an environmental education area, which Dr. Schultz has outlined. So thank you for that, and I have a couple of brief questions to go with that, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Firstly, will council agree not to dredge, but take the alternative and cheaper option of sensitive riparian restoration with our help, i.e. designed by skilled local restoration ecologists? Secondly, will council agree as a matter of urgency to rectify the current subdivision damage beside Camp Creek and near the airport, to ensure that the current environmental impacts occurring there, and some people would say it's environmental vandalism, will be ceased forthwith and rehabilitated? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. GM, I guess there will be questions that the council as a group needs to discuss later.
Correct. Through Mr. Mayor, I think my comments, as stated, Dr. Schultz, remain consistent. We will provide a reply in writing to Mr. Pearce, and certainly the points he raised around the subdivision damage is something we'll need to investigate as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public statements without notice and questions, and it is now 6:25, and we move into the planning section on tonight's agenda. And any public questions without notice relating to planning matters and public statements relating to planning matters in that section, which I believe we don't have any. So we'll move on to item 6.3, application for planning scheme amendment, Bass Highway, Somerset. There is a recommendation there, councillors.
So moved.
That was Councillor Courtney.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Doniam seconded. Any discussion? Would you have any debate on that, Councillor Courtney?
No, now I understand it from speaking with our planning manager. I don't see any issues for council. I'm totally okay with it.
Okay. Any further speakers regarding that matter? If not, I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. That was 6.3. And that's it. That's it. is 6:27. We ceased being a planning authority and we move on to item 7.1, responses to councillors' questions taken on notice from the previous meeting, and councillors' questions without notice. So 7.3, where we're at now. Councillors' questions without notice. None?
Yep, I do.
Oh, I see your light on. Thank you. Councillor Courtney.
I've got two questions without notice. The first one I came here with tonight because I've been asked a few times about what's going on with the tender for the waste, for the depot down there, for the waste transfer station. So I've been asked a fair bit lately what's happening with the tender. So if I could get an update on the record through the engineering manager as to where we're at, that would be much appreciated. And then I'll give you the second question.
Mr. Summers, over to you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's currently no tender out for that. The current contractor, I believe, with the current contract, there's an option to extend for a further year from 30th of June, if I'm not correct. So currently no tender advertised. So.
Thank you. Second question, Councillor Courtney.
Thanks for that, because now that's on the record, we're all good. The second question, I would have asked Mr. Ewington if he could give any examples as to where we were being obstructive or where we weren't being helpful in disability matters. I might just want to ask the question in a way that I'm just going to say it, and you know what I'm like, and I don't mean any offence, but it's clear that Mr. Ewington is now using a negative campaign against council in the run-up to elections. To come here tonight and say what he said when we've spent so much money trying to defend ourselves against the claims that he's made was so unfair, and I'd like to know when it becomes vexatious. That's my question.
Yep.
When does it become vexatious so we can actually do something about it and stop it?
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Mr. GM.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. I note those comments, Councillor Courtney. I also may take the opportunity just to respond to some of the comments of Mr. Ewington earlier in the evening. He is correct. He did ask Council in November to consider the development of a disability action plan. Council currently has, rather than one specific document, a range of actions in this regard listed in its already adopted strategies. So through our youth plan, our age-friendly community plan, our community health and wellbeing plan, we do have a number of actions in this space. We do have an opportunity as part of the setting of the 2022-23 annual plan to consider a specific action in this regard, but certainly it's very difficult to commit resources in the space of a couple of months to an action that has been brought up, and it's simply not possible to respond in that time frame in that type of task. We'd already have plans in place, as I mentioned. Specifically in relation to tactile pavers, Mr. Ewington has lodged previous complaints with Equal Opportunity Tasmania in this regard. We do have an agreement, if you like, that has been made around Council's commitment to explore tactile pavers where needed and where necessary and where compliant with the necessary Australian standards. And we have examples where we have placed tactile pavers down as we've done new works. Most recent example would be, I think from memory, at the Beijing restaurant in Somerset. As part of those works, there would be tactile surface indicators placed there. So there are examples where they are being rolled out. Clearly, it's not to the time frame that Mr. Ewington expects, nor to the volume Mr. Ewington expects, but I'm comfortable that we are working towards that agreed position that we've made.
Thank you, Mr. GM. Any councillors with further questions? We'll move on to item 8 on the agenda. Councillor Fairbrother.
Mayor Walsh, I have a question without notice, if I can, please.
Yep.
My question is, can council write to the respective minister or responsible government bureaucrat thanking them for the upgrade of the Sisters Beach fire breaks in accordance with recommendations in the Western Fire District report of, I think it was 2020. There was a number of recommendations. One was that the fire breaks be upgraded. Council subsequently, for the benefit of councillors, wrote to the respective minister, I believe, some time ago and said, hey, how about you guys upgrade the fire breaks in accordance with the recommendations within the report. That has occurred as a result of the fire that was at Sisters Beach over the Christmas period, and they've done a job better than well done, upgrading and maintaining the fire breaks, which provide a greater deal of security for the Sisters Beach residents. So it has been a really good job, and I think we need to recognise the work that Parks as well as Tasfire have done on behalf of the community.
Thank you. Any further councillors' questions without notice? We'll move on to the notices of motion. 8.1 on the agenda is Councillor Bramish's, and it's the electronic community notice board, and proposed motion is there.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll need a second of that. I'll move as.
Move Councillor Bramish.
I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Duniam seconded. Over to you. You wish to open the debate, Councillor Bramish?
Thank you. Well, it's pretty straightforward. Something we've talked about in this council off and on over a number of years, and I believe that it might put, especially if it can be operated from in-house, there might be a lot more stuff being promoted and advertised. Plus, it will put, not that we need any, it'll put some life in the town, I believe, with a bit of stuff the community could read. We've got social media and all that, but it's just something a little bit different, I thought. There's one in Ulverston. I have sat in the bakery and looked out the window and seen some interesting things on it. And I thought, well, it's something we could have a look at here, I thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bramish. Any further speakers? Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I like the concept, but can I ask a question first?
Okay.
What type of information are you wanting to display on this notice board, and who actually, so it will be council that do it, but what type of information do you want to have on it?
Councillor Bramish.
Oh, just that there's a car showing Wynyard at the weekend, or someone's coming to Wynyard next week, or you know, just a basic information like that.
Thank you.
Or advertising, whatever.
Thank you.
Okay. Because I got onto, well, I think more work needs to be done in this area, because I got onto the Goondiwindi Regional Council, and we need to have like a guidelines and procedure in that. There's a lot of things that they won't have on it, but there's a lot of things that they will have on it. So I think it needs a lot further discussion. And I would like to wait until if we do the survey for 2022, or discuss at a further workshop. Because
Okay.
I think it just needs more work doing to it.
Any further speakers regarding this motion?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Duniam.
Thank you. Yes, I do agree with you, Councillor Edwards. I do think that we already have a medium or a platform for our notices, and that's our social media. And I think that that's utilised extensively to promote everything that the council does. And I would suggest also, Councillor Bromwich, you use social media as well. So it is something that is being used extensively, and I think that I'm not quite sure whether I support this. However, I did bring it up myself some time ago about these particular boards. One thing that isn't considered here is the costs, and I think that further investigation is important to understand what it will cost, or for the two boards, what's the cost, and the maintenance costs, security, etc. So I think that we really need to have a lot more information so that we can really consider it appropriately.
Okay, any further speakers regarding this 8.1 on the books?
Yep.
Okay. The light's on. Councillor Courtney.
Yep, I'd like to just say, big fella, you know I love you, and I think it's a really good idea, but there's budgetary, lines we've got to look at, and there's no expense there. So before I give you a blank cheque, I think we should probably bring it to a workshop, because I've asked for electronic calendars, and I think that having them in the malls is a flaming good idea. But since we've come past the age of COVID, I know when Councillor Ali House was here, we all spoke about having community notice boards, and that was a really good idea. But now we've all gone through COVID, I think that the QR codes are a lot better way to get across to the community, to have that central in town so that we can scan those and there's no asset there that we have to maintain or we have to have security cameras on or anything else. So I'd sort of like to go that way. So I'm just wondering if we could bring it to a workshop before going ahead tonight, if that's okay, because I'm keen with you. But
Any further speakers regarding this motion?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I think Councillor Brumage, if you could define exactly what sort of a system you wanted, and we took it out to that community survey with exact details, and I think you've got a fair chance of winning us over.
Okay, any further speakers? If not, I'll ask Councillor Bremish, would you like to sum up?
Thank you. Look, I did a bit worried about giving me a blank cheque. I didn't want a blank cheque tonight. And I'm quite happy to go to a workshop and be considered in the budget to work out some costs and all that sort of thing. It's been talked about for a few years now at the post office wall or somewhere like that in the cow paddock, and I thought, well, that's a good idea, but nothing sort of ever happened, and I thought, well, I might see if I bring it to a head. And I don't care whether it's on the arches or whether it's on the archway over in Somerset. I don't really care where it goes. And I wasn't aware council could control it in this building until I read this, but that'd be brilliant. But I'm quite happy to take it to a workshop and that sort of thing. Maybe we should include that in it, should we? So the motion don't get voted down. Would that be an option, Mr General Manager?
I'm not sure you can weave that into the motion as it's written, right. Councillor Bramage. You could have a procedural motion where the matter was deferred pending workshop. That would probably be the best bet. Am I allowed to move that, since I'm the mover of the motion? No, but someone else could. How much money do you want?
I'll move that motion.
I'll second it, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Courtney moved the procedural motion, and Deputy Mayor seconded it, and the debate ceases at that. And
well, Mayor Walsh, it's a technical question. Hasn't Councillor Bramage summed up? And debate has closed. I just wonder about the proper procedure of it all. This having a procedural motion put after the speaker's summed up on the existing motion. Wouldn't it be better to have a subsequent motion after this one's either put and lost, or it's not for me?
How do we go there, Mr GM? What's your recommendation?
In this case, the question remains whether the chairperson believes the debate had closed. Councillor Bramage was certainly still speaking. He hadn't concluded his discussion, and the chairperson considers the particular procedural motion has the ability to accept or reject that motion. So it is ultimately with the chair to determine whether or not he believes that procedural motion is indeed acceptable. Yeah, well, as I give it thought, I believe Councillor Bramage was continuing along the lines of accepting that someone take it to a procedural motion, and he hadn't closed. That's my opinion. He hadn't closed the debate. He was speaking on the preferences of people around the table, and the suggestion came of the procedural motion, and he hadn't ceased closing the debate. No. No, if you accept the motion, that's it. I've accepted the procedural motion, and the matter, we don't take a vote on that, it's a procedural motion. Yeah, Chair put it to
Well,
vote.
Mayor, I don't believe Councillor Courtney can move a procedural motion given that she's already spoken. Is that correct?
I don't believe so. She, I don't think that's got any effect on the procedural motion. And I'll put the procedural motion. There'll be a division. Please indicate. Those for the procedural motion, please indicate. Councillor Dunyam, Councillor Bramage, Councillor Courtney, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Fairbrother, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Holland and myself, unanimously carried. 8.3, changes to planning and building rules. There was a notice of motion there from Councillor Fairbrother.
8.2, Mr Mayor.
Oh, missed one? Where was that? Oh, so it was. Sorry about that. I was going to come back to that one anyway. 8.2, Councillor Dunyam, safety measures at the Somerset traffic lights.
Yes, I'd like to move as per the recommendations.
Move Councillor Dunyam. Councillor Bradley. Okay, you wish to open the debate, Councillor Dunyam?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I have explained quite fully the situation in Somerset. The safety of our road users, particularly at the traffic lights in Falmouth Street. Really, some of the close shaves that I've witnessed over the last few months, what I need to say is that whenever we leave the esplanade itself, we always go out from that junction at the traffic lights because of the amount of traffic that's there. So I've made some recommendations there. One is to reduce the speed from 70 to a non-variable 60 k permanently on the Bass Highway through Somerset, so that the trucks actually do slow down sufficiently to go through the junction. Rather than going through red lights. Recommend the installation of the cameras at the traffic lights, and that would monitor some of these situations. Do not use engine brakes in a built-up area. Trucks are just simply not following that directive. And the fourth one is to stop a right-hand turn of traffic travelling west on the Bass Highway into the T-junction of Bass Highway and western end of Somerset Esplanade. The reason I brought that up is because of the number of close shaves in terms of rear-ending when people go to turn right. It's really quite narrow there. So I'd like the council to support these recommendations. They are recommendations only, and I think that we need to get some feedback from state growth, so that we can see if anything can be done to make it a safer drive through Somerset.
Thank you. Any further speakers regarding this motion? Councillor Bramage.
Thanks, Mayor.
And Councillor Courtney.
I will not support this motion, and with all due respects, I take offence to the comments made by the trucks. Yes, not all trucks would obey the signs, but neither does car drivers, so let me make that clear. And as far as trucks going through red lights, that'd be few and far between, I believe, because most trucks now are fitted with monitors that goes back to their workshops or their depots. If anything's wrong, it's documented. Speeding or anything like that. I wouldn't recommend a speed change because we get vertigo now looking at speed limit changes on the Bass Highway. But I'm disappointed that we as a council would get involved in this after the highway's done. Let's say go through the highway, let them upgrade it. And I wouldn't have thought, being a truck driver myself, I wouldn't have thought there's too much difference turning into the Esplanade in a westerly direction that turned into Gaffney's from an easterly direction. Or Arthur Street on an easterly direction. So for that, I just cannot support this motion, and I don't think council should get involved in this on State Growth Road. There's opportunity here for anyone that's got any concerns, councillors or public, to submit to the State Growth their concerns. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Courtney, you're next.
I'm not going to be as hard. Just noting too that it's only a replacement of the sign on the truck stuff, big fella. It's not new. It's just a replacement of a sign. So she's not going to dig. I would have if you had worded the first one differently. So the only problem, I've got no problem making a recommendation to make it safer. If that's what their engineers come back with, that it's correct, then I think that's not a bad thing. But I don't think it's right for council to recommend a reduction. I think it's okay for us to recommend a review of the speed limit as part of the highway upgrades that are going on, but I'm not happy with the wording that we recommend a reduction. If we recommend a review, I'm happy to support it based on that, but not on the wording that's there.
Okay, Councillor Fairbrother, you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. I don't support the motion on the basis that it is a state government road, and I don't think the local council should be making recommendations for improvements to their road, especially when it has been flagged and a study has been done on Cooey to Camdale or Camdale to Cooey. The road, there's been money already allocated for the upgrade of the Cam River Bridge. Who knows what improvements will come by that expenditure. I think that we're best to wait till after those road improvements have been made. We've had representation from state government representatives indicating a number of other changes that will be made on that section of road to impact the Cooey Crawl. I don't think that it's a matter for council to get involved with. Councillor Bramage rightly, to me, indicates other potential areas such as Gaffney, Arthur Street, Raglan Street, which all have issues. I do note that Gates's Road at Flowerdale had similar left and right turn issues. The state government elected to put in a left turn lane as opposed to prohibiting left turns or right turns. So for me, section 4, or recommendation 4, we'd be better off if you were going to advocate a position to ask them to put a right turn lane in or a left turn lane in through that section to address Arthur Street, Raglan Street, as well as the Esplanade. However, for me, it's not a matter for council. If they want to seek our input, I think that we can then give it. However, for me, it's not a fight that we should be picking with the government and telling them how to look after their roads.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. Any further speakers? Councillor Hyland.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's not a real complete list. I think it's a fair way off, and Councillor Fairbrother did indicate our name, Raglan Street, and I would think Raglan Street would be one of the worst for turning right, particularly with those trucks coming around that corner, and there's a bank up of a few cars, you just can't see them, and I think that's a real snag there. And as everyone said, I think we really need to have a good look at it and wait for them to come to us and have a look at it then.
Okay, any further speakers? Councillor Bradley.
Mr. Mayor, there are issues at that traffic lights at Somerset, but I find it's more with the pedestrians. The pedestrians are more at risk than anything else, and I've heard several stories of pedestrians nearly being wiped out coming from a car from Burnie turning up into Falmouth Street. There's a high bank there, and if you're a short person, they can't see, they come around and they can't see the person standing there. So I find there's more issues, and especially with school children going up to the school, that's the only set of traffic lights they've got to cross to go up to their school now at Somerset. So I find it's more with pedestrians and the people than cars and trucks.
Thank you. Any further speakers? I'll now ask the mover of the motion, Councillor Dunyam, you wish to close the debate.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that it has brought out some very strong opinions, if you like, about this particular motion. Living in Somerset, I do witness a lot more of these situations, and Councillor Bramage said that the trucks do slow down. Not only myself, but many people have commented on the fact that the trucks are not slowing down when they get to those lights. They try to beat the lights. However, I take on board all of the comments that have been made, and I think that obviously this motion won't be supported. With the fact that the state growth will be going through and finishing that road off, then we, as suggested, we can look at whether any other recommendations should be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dunyam. I'll now call for a show of hands in relation to the division. So those in favour of the motion, please indicate. Councillor Dunyam. Those against? Everyone else. The motion is lost. Okay, 8.3, Councillor Fairbrother. By now. Thank you. Councillor Fairbrother, changes to the planning and building rules, your proposed motion?
Prepared to move as per the recommendation, Mayor, or the proposed motion.
We have Okay, you'd like to open the debate, Councillor Fairbrother?
I will, Mayor. The good news with this motion is that the person that made representation to me has already made representation to government, and as a result of his recommendation there already has been changes made. Council officers, I am fairly confident, can say that they have become better informed as a part, as the effect of the agitation is the word I'd use by the complainant in this matter. The representative who made representation to me, as well as state government on this particular matter, identified that there is some inconsistencies with the bushfire and the planning provisions for areas designated landslip B in particular. But thankfully, because of his agitation, some clarity has already been provided by the CBOS, who are the regulating authority for the legislation under the Building Act and the building regulations. What the motion's trying to advocate is that we would, as a council, like the government to undertake a review of the legislation to ensure that there is consistency, because at the moment it has been identified that there is inconsistencies with it, and that has resulted in difficulty for council staff being able to issue compliance or compliance certificates for work that has been completed, as in the Moore Street problem. There are also problems at Boat Harbour Beach in particular with some buildings. They are in disrepair. They have been granted planning approval, however they can't obtain building approval for one reason or another. This motion again asks the government to undertake a review to see whether we've got the best, fairer, clearer and cheaper process in respect to landslip A. Worst case scenario is the government conducts a review and they come back to council and say, we've conducted a review, we're going to leave them as they are. That's the worst case scenario. The best case scenario is that the state government undertake a review and they come up with a better, fairer, clearer, simpler method of dealing with these two issues. One is the bushfire and water storage on landslip B, and the other one is the repair, replacement and renovation of existing buildings in areas designated landslip A. To me, they need to be fairer, clearer and simpler provisions so that not only our officers but everybody that deals with these type of things has a clearer performance-based process to deal with rather than the prescriptive one that we have. So I'd ask councillors to support the proposed review and the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. Any speakers to the motion? For or against? Councillor Courtney. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bramish.
I'm pretty sure they'll both beat me.
Councillor Highland, yours next.
They both beat me.
Yeah, just a question through you, Mr Mayor, to Councillor Fairbrother, just for the record. Just wondered whether he'd given any further consideration whether or not he's got a conflict of interest in this item.
A question to Councillor Fairbrother.
Councillor Highland, to respond to your question, I have no buildings in landslip A, if that's what you're referring to, nor do I have problems with water storage in landslip B. If you think that I do, I'd be happy for you to declare what they are because I am unaware of any conflict.
Just the fact that you're an owner of 2 blocks of land which has landslip A and landslip B in the Boat Harbour area, that's all.
Mayor Walsh, for the benefit, the motion is repair, replacement, renovation of existing buildings in areas of designated landslip A. As I've indicated to Councillor Highland, I own no buildings in landslip A. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards was next.
Just a question. Are we already actioning the Ombudsman for recommendation to look into this area of planning?
Mr GM, Mr Thornton, or do we, where are we with that one?
Sorry, so the question is around are we providing the information the Ombudsman is seeking? Is that what you're referring to?
From what we talked at the workshop, that we were going to let the Ombudsman work in that area for us?
Yeah.
Or did that come through via email today? But I see
no,
the two
no.
as two different.
I'm just looking for our comment. It appears to me there's certainly some information I think missing from the reply, but the Ombudsman, obviously the property owner, if you like, affected by this particular matter has taken up his complaint with the Ombudsman. That's the first point. We are responding and working through that particular process. There may be an avenue for the Ombudsman to, I guess, instigate or trigger a review of the legislation, which would take some time, but that would only occur should council formally, I guess, request that to take place and for us to, I guess, express all of our concerns and issues with the legislation as it stands. So, as I read it, as part of this particular proposed motion, where it says write to the respective ministers and/or state bureaucrats requesting changes, potentially, if we included the Ombudsman as one of those people, that would give them the information they need, which may or may not trigger a review from their perspective.
Thank you, Mr GM. Councillor Courtney.
Mine was a real quick one because I know you're real particular on wording, and you've said a number of times that we're going to request review, but you've actually written it that we request they make these changes. I'm quite happy to request review based on the Ombudsman process that sort of highlighted that these problems are there. I'm not so keen on saying I recommend that we make these changes. So recommending that we request review, I'm completely happy with, but recommending that we request these changes, I'm not going to support that with that wording.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Any further speakers?
Another question.
Okay, question. Councillor Hyland.
Given if the motion gets up, the first line where the mover suggests council has a number of ratepayers with building related problems that can be attributed. Is there anything there I'm not having read it, is there anything there that sort of triggers us then to start processing all that and write letters and source all these names and addresses and start that process, or is it not to that stage? And like Councillor Courtney, that the motion requests council to initiate changes on behalf of its community, so that puts us in the hot seat.
This one here, Mr. G.
Yep. That's what I'm a bit concerned about.
Yeah. Do we have an answer to that question? Do we have an answer to that Councillor Hyland's question there, Mr. GM? No. I'll read it. Council has a number of ratepayers with building-related problems that can be attributed to deficiencies within legislation. Council has a number of ratepayers with building-related problems that can be attributed to deficiencies within the legislation.
That information is in the background information. It wouldn't necessarily have to be. You're not making a decision on the background information. Your decision is on the motion, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
So the wording of the motion is the important aspect, not so much what's in the background information.
Gotcha.
I will.
Yeah.
I was slightly distracted because there is a paragraph that has disappeared out of the officer's comments, which is why I was a little off there a minute ago, and I'll just read it just for your information. It was in my version. It says the Ombudsman Office acknowledged there appear to be limitations within the legislation that may require further review, and have suggested Council detail any perceived difficulties in the legislation, which may then trigger a broader inquiry into how other planning authorities experience using the building scheme and whether or not it needs amendment. So essentially what they've said to us is that if we put a submission forward, they may then write to other councils or other authorities and find out if they're having similar issues, and if they then come back and say they are, that would then prompt a review from their perspective.
Thank you, Mr. GM. Councillor Bramish.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess clearly something needs to happen with some departments to review something. I guess it's probably pretty sad if you can get a planning permit but can't get a building permit. That's probably pretty bloody sad. Sorry, that's probably pretty sad. So I think something needs to happen. Thank you.
Okay, any further speakers? Councillor Duniam.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm with Councillor Courtney on this. I think that review is what needs to happen, and it does sound like that the process is almost underway in terms of the Ombudsman wanting information so it can be reviewed. So I do believe that the wording is fairly strong. However, I do think that the review process would be the most appropriate way to go.
Thank you. Any further speakers? If not, I'll ask Councillor Fairbrother, would he like to close the debate?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'm not pedantic on the words of the motion. Requesting changes and the word review, to me, the words, I'm happy if council laws are of the mind that they'd prefer the word review as opposed to requesting changes. With the mover, with the seconder, I'm quite happy to make those changes. To me, the word request changes is that we ask the question for them to conduct a review. So to me, it's nebulous. It's either we ask for a review or we ask them to make changes, and as part of that, they'll do a review anyway. Obviously, to me. So Mayor, I'm not quite sure how you'd like to deal with that matter.
If the mover and the seconder are happy, the word can be changed, and I'll accept that.
Yes, well, Mayor, that perhaps the first bit, if the seconder is happy, the council write to the respective ministers and/or state government bureaucrats requesting a review to the planning building rules to provide for the following.
Yep. Okay. Happy with that, Mr. Seconder? Okay. You'd like to close the debate? Councillor Fairbrother?
Yeah, I do. Mayor, I'm sorry if councillors aren't aware of some of the local issues that are at Boat Harbour. I did endeavour to make them aware at the January meeting that we had a development application for a new deck just over the road from Seekers that we were providing planning consent for. Essentially, that building, as I understand it, will trigger, or may well trigger, the bushfire requirements as it is within 30 metres of a Crown Reserve as well as standing vegetation. So that, as an example, will be one that could be snagged, to use the Ombudsman's term, and there are numerous other ones. I can reel off Chaz Kelly's property, Steve Warren's property, and there's numerous other properties at Boat Harbour that are facing problems that need rectification, or alternatively they haven't got a legislative pathway, in my view, to get the proper building and planning approval. So hence the representation that's been made to me has been made to the Ombudsman. The Ombudsman has indicated that on a desktop assessment there is a snag, to use his word, that potentially needs to be reviewed and hopefully fixed. The fact that the local planning authority has also flagged it as an issue, to me, is important, primarily because we need to listen to our ratepayers, and they have made representation to me. If they haven't made representation to you, I'm sorry, but they have made representation to the Minister. They have made representation to anybody else that's prepared to listen, including the Ombudsman. I think it'd be good for us to add weight to their concerns and complaint and pass this motion to make representation, or make the ministers and state government bureaucrats aware of the problems that people at Boat Harbour Beach in particular are facing. So I'd ask for your support.
Okay, the debate is closed. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please indicate.
Division, Mr Mayor.
Okay, there were division. Those in favour of the motion, please indicate. Councillor Dunyam, Councillor Bremish, Councillor Courtney, Councillor Bradley, Councillor Fairbrother. And those against, Councillor Edwards, Councillor Hyland and myself. The motion is carried.
Who's next?
Okay, item 8.4 is the next one. Councillor Dunyam, a development of local heritage register. You have a proposed motion.
Yes, as per the recommendation, Mr Mayor.
And I'll second that motion.
Seconded, Councillor Courtney. You wish to open the debate, Councillor Dunyam?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this is for information to be recorded by the council, however, only to record and register information, not to be a repository of information. We have an amazing municipality, and I believe that while we have the Wynyard Historical Society, we've got the museum at Waratah, there are so many areas that are being missed out on, so that those people that are interested in understanding our history are able to resource that information. The two local heritage significant reports that were provided from 2012, which are, and by the way, they are 10 years old, it does mean that the council has already started on that. This is not about a local heritage code. This is just simply a register. Some of the things that I was looking at while I was writing this explore the wonders of Wynyard's geology. It is information that we probably should be just referring to. Waratah, Pioneer of the West, A Peopled Frontier by Nick Haygarth, and he's written heaps and heaps of books about the West Coast. A brief archaeological inspection of the site of proposed exploration drilling at the Magnet AG PB mine, and an archaeological survey of the Magnet mine. there's a heap of information out there that probably we should be able to just register in terms of being able to provide people with that information. While I have suggested that we draft a policy to support this register and that there are criteria that needs to be met, that does cull out some of the unnecessary information that we may be provided with. Also, the heritage does give the community an opportunity to promote areas that they believe should be part of that heritage register, and I'm thinking of Table Cape. It's gone out of my head, the other one that I was thinking for the moment, but areas in Somerset, areas at Sisters Beach, Boat Harbour, wherever we go, this is an amazing municipality, and I think that if we can just begin to register that information, not be the repository of that information, it does mean that we are promoting the history of our municipality, which is very, very extensive, and I think that we should consider that it is good for the future, for our future generations, that they can understand the heritage and the history of our place.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. Any further speakers? Councillor Courtney.
Yeah, I second the motion because I think it's a good idea for us to have the Heritage Register, and I think it looks like from the officer's comments that there may be a minimal cost. It might be that we'd be able to work with the Historical Society, so I'd like to at least have a look at it and put a register forward, which we would be able to, by the looks of it, get off the Historical Society to be able to start us off, and then we can look at the ongoing costs from there. So okay. I support the idea, and I'd like to know where we go from here with it.
Okay. Councillor Hyland, you wish to
Yeah,
speak?
certainly support the idea, Mr Mayor, and I think we probably should, I'm not sure how we could to word it tonight, but I really strongly believe that we should talk to the Historical Society and obviously get them to lead and for council to offer all the support they need. And it's a job they can do, and I'm sure with the group that they've currently got, and just council just assist along the way, and it's a win-win for everybody, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Hyland. Any further speakers? Councillor Fairbrother.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I don't disagree with Councillor Hyland's comments. I just don't think that it's reflected in the motion. I did have a couple of questions. My question is, if I wanted to access this information once it's collated, how do I do that? And what's it for? Because at the moment, I'd say that, and I have to confess, I've just recently been a convert of history of Wynyard, and I don't need no heritage register for me to go and quell my thirst for Wynyard's history. It's all out there. It just depends on what your area of interest is. And I have difficulty with the motion because who's to say what's in and what's out? Because what's important to me may not necessarily be important to the rest of the municipality. And I'd say, as a first port of call, as a matter of courtesy, if we want to work with the local groups, I think we best go and have a conversation with them and find out, especially given their area of expertise is history, go and find out from them what it is that we can do to help them, and find out whether is a local heritage register something that we really need, given that we've already got the bulk of the work about our buildings already done. Is this motion really the best way that we can work with our local community? I say that our heritage group has been knocking on our door for some time to come up with they want to come and talk to us about our cemeteries. And I've raised the issue with the General Manager and staff for some time, and I've been told that we'll get them along when we deal with our cemetery strategy. They've been, the last historical group meeting, they keep on saying, when's this going to happen, Darren? When's this going to happen? And I've been saying, maybe in the new year. Don't hold your breath. We're getting to it. And to be fair, council staff have talked to the local history group. It's just that they would love to have an audience with us so that we all can get on the same page. And I think that it would be advantageous for us to have the discussion with them first, and then, if it is necessary, work with them to come up with the development of a local heritage register. Because I know my mother-in-law's property, or ex-property, is on the heritage inventory out at Myalla. But if you go and have a look at the house, I'm left asking myself, because there's been a developer come through, he's developed it and he's destroyed some of the intrinsic features that are attributed to a Victorian Georgian building. And it's like, oh. And we had one here the other day, the old Bowick service station. There was an old house that was demolished. I went and had a look at it before it was demolished. I thought, oh, what would you do with that? You would pull it down as the developer. That house, as well as many of the other houses in our heritage register, you can go to the local newsagents and buy a book about Wynyard's old houses, and it gives you quite a bit of history about who owned them and what they were about. I say, have a look up there on the honour roll.
Can I do a point of order? Because it's only for a draft, Asla. It's only a draft. We're just saying, well, should we draft it?
No,
and put it up?
The motion says draft, which is draw up, not a. It says draft, which is draw up a local heritage register. It's not. We've already got. Yeah, there's not clarity. There's not clarity in the motion, so I can't support it. I say around this council table we have more stories that can be told that have heritage value. So much so that in our budget I have made a request for a line item that we tell some of the stories about Wynyard's heritage, which is, to me, different to a heritage register. You're not going to put stories about Wynyard in a heritage register.
But we haven't got the policies. It's the draft of the policies. That's my point of order. Like, get back. Can you come back to the
Councillor
point?
Courtney, Councillor Fairbrother's got the floor at the moment, and when he's finished, if you've got a question, you can ask that. But at the moment, we're not having a to and fro conversation across the chambers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh. So it comes back to my original question. I don't think that it is appropriate for me to support the motion when I think Councillor Hyland identified it'd be great for us to work with the local history group on working with them. We provide them with support for whatever it is that they think we need as a community. So I'd be supporting if Councillor Hyland was flagging an alternate motion to indicate that we need to work with the local history group. If he doesn't, I can flag that perhaps a more appropriate motion is that we invite them along to one of our workshops and have a discussion about history-related things, including a heritage register, and instead of putting the cart before the horse, we get our things in order before we go and spend further council resources on creating a register that, to me, won't necessarily be available for the wider community. So I can't support the motion.
Okay, we will continue with anyone else that wishes to speak in regarding this motion. Councillor Courtney, Councillor Bramish.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I move a subsequent motion?
How do we go with that?
I haven't spoke or anything.
If this one fails, you've got a proposed motion to take it over. Okay. It's okay.
Mayor Walsh, question, can Councillor Bramage foreshadow what his proposed motion is so the rest of us have the understanding
that we take this to a workshop before any decisions are made and invite the appropriate people along for a discussion.
Yeah, that would be a procedural motion in my opinion. need to be. We need to deal with, if you're going to move a procedural motion, Councillor Bramish, you have the floor at the moment if you wish it to continue.
Yeah, just that you got the wording, that take it to a workshop and invite the appropriate people along for a discussion of how we may go about doing this.
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, move Councillor Bramish, seconded Councillor Courtney, and we'll take a vote on that.
Mayor, before you do, could I ask the indulgence of the mover and seconder and add the words cemetery strategy to that? Because the local history group have an interest in the local heritage register, but they have been wanting to come and talk to us about our cemetery strategy, and the general manager may wish to make comment on that.
In all due respect, Councillor Fairbrother, that was never entered in this motion, and the procedural motion is on the motion that we've got on the books, and I believe that is other information that could nothing to do with it. Yep. Okay, we'll take a vote. Those for the procedural motion and those against. Those in favour, please. Councillor Dunyam, Bramish, Courtney, Bradley, Fairbrother, Edwards. Were you in that, Councillor Hyland? No. Yeah, okay, Councillor Hyland, myself. Well, it's unanimous, okay. Carried. Did we get the details on that, Sally? Okay, thank you. We're going all right, are we? Yep. We're right. That was 8.4. That concludes those notices of motions. And we move to 9.1. Yeah, okay. And, the reporting officer is the Director of Organisational Performance. 9.1 is the public land disposal consultation outcome, Waratah. And prior to taking a mover and a seconder on this, I'd ask our Director of Organisational Performance, Mrs. Searle, would you like to enlighten us on this matter, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to amend this recommendation to Council and remove 0 Quiggin Street and 6 Main Street from the second part of the motion. So since we prepared the agenda, there's some additional information that has come to light that I'd like to investigate further and bring back to Council so that Council's decision is informed. So 6 Main Street has some old mining equipment located on it that may have some local level heritage value to the local community in Waratah. So I'd like to just investigate that a little bit further and understand what we do with that equipment if we proceed with the sale. And 0 Quiggin Street, we just need to do a deed search to confirm Council's ownership before we make a decision. So I recommend that we just make a decision relating to Walker Street this evening and note the public consultation outcome for all 3 properties this evening.
I'll move the motion with the amendment,
I'll
Mr. Mayor.
second that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Searle, and move Councillor Courtney. And second, Councillor Deputy Mayor Dunyam. Yeah, okay. Okay, you've heard the story, and we were advised of that earlier today, and away we go. Any discussion? No discussion? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. (9.2) Tree management policy, that the council adopt the tree management policy as presented.
I'll move that motion.
Councillor Courtney moved.
I'll second that, Mr. Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Dunyam seconded. Any discussion? I'll put...
No discussion. I think that from myself as a mover, because I think that provides a lot of clarity that we haven't been able to stand on solid ground on these issues in the past, and having a policy there for everybody to be able to read it and understand why we've made our decisions and, you know, the result of it. And I think that's a good idea for us to have this.
Thank you. Councillor Bramish, you had your light on, and I think you might have wanted to speak.
I just wanted to ask a question.
A question from Councillor Bramish.
I don't disagree with this. I think it's brilliant. Have we ever had a tree management policy in place?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, we have. It's just noted in the early part of the report that the last time this was reviewed in early 2020, it was reviewed to be an internal policy. We're putting it up again as we think there's more value in having it as an external facing policy that the public can access. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Summers. Councillor Fairbrother, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Mayor Walsh, there was an email circulated late last week on made specific comment about Banksia serrata. It was sent to all elected members. I don't know whether did council staff get a copy of the correspondence. It was essentially that whilst Banksia serrata has legislative recognition in its own right, the communication did indicate that the council's tree policy is silent on that. My thoughts is that given that the legislation refers to Banksia serrata and doesn't necessarily need to be specifically addressed in our tree policy, I just wondered whether improvement of our tree policy would be reference to other state government legislation. If it doesn't already do it, needs to be adhered to just to for completeness, perhaps. I don't know whether council staff have any comment to make on my comments.
I guess I'll take it on board. Isn't any... Mr. Summers, would you have anything to say on that matter?
I'd probably offer for comfort in the absence of any mention that the legislation holds, of course. I guess typically the policies are intended to give direction on matters of discretion, but if you've got threatened species of vegetation with legislative requirements, that would hold, of course. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Summers. Any further speakers? Any further questions? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. We now move on to 9.3, the financial report for the period ended the 31st of June.
So moved.
So moved, Councillor Courtney.
I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Deputy Mayor Donia. Any questions before I put the motion?
No, I'd like to thank the GM for the financial reports that come back and say that we've got more favourable outcomes than unfavourable. So you're doing something well there at the head of the table there, managers. Thank you very much.
Okay, any further? Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question in the, just come out, what area it is, in the explanations forecast variance of 20,000 or greater. I just wanted to ask for number 5, is it sustainable for council to keep the early payment discount continuing, seeing as it has cost council around $450,000 to our budget operations?
Mrs. Searle, do you have a answer to that question?
Through you, Mr Mayor. So just for clarity, council has an early payment discount as a part of its rates and charges policy. So if ratepayers pay their rates and charges in full by the 31st of August, they receive a 5% discount on their rates and charges bill. So the cost of that incentive for the year, in the current financial year to date, has been $454,174. So is it financially sustainable, I think the question was. It's certainly a costly policy for council. The cost of that incentive is offset by any interest that council receives on investments that we receive from that income. At the moment, our investment income is sitting at 0.32%, so it's at record lows. So it has come at an increasing cost to council as a result of that. I guess whether or not it's sustainable for council is probably a question for the council itself when we go through our budget deliberations, where we look at the rates and charges policy in full. And of course, with all budget deliberations, council needs to weigh up the allocation of resources when in an environment of competing demands for those resources. So it's something for council to consider as a part of its budget deliberations. But certainly if council were of the mind to make an adjustment to that policy, there's potential for an increase or decrease in cost. But it's worth noting that 74% of ratepayers currently take up that discount and receive the benefit from that.
Thank you, Mrs. Searle. Councillor Bramish.
It used to be 10% a few years ago.
Yep. Yes, and it's eagerly accepted by a lot of the older people in the community. Any further questions? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. 9.4 is the senior management report, and this recommendation that the council note the monthly senior management report.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
That was Deputy Mayor Doniam.
I'll second that.
Councillor Edwards. Any questions? Any speakers? I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. (9.5) Minutes of other bodies and committees. There are nil. And at this stage we are at matters proposed for consideration in the closed meeting, and that a motion that the council resolves by absolute majority that the matters listed below be considered in that closed meeting. Would we have a motion, please?
So moved.
There was
Seconded.
Deputy Mayor Doniam and Councillor Courtney. I'll put the motion. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And at 7:33, a recommendation that the council resolves absolute majority to go into closed meeting to consider the following.
So moved, Mr Mayor.
And seconded.